The colonel attacked her. What she did next left the entire base stunned. First story outline. Staff Sergeant Maria had spent 8 years building her reputation at Fort. Known for her unwavering dedication and sharp tactical mind, she commanded respect from soldiers and officers alike. Her unit consistently performed at the top of their division, and her personnel files contained nothing but commendations and praise from superior officers. The trouble began when Colonel James arrived at the base 3 months earlier. A decorated veteran with 30 years of service carried himself with an air of old-school military authority that some found intimidating. Maria had noticed his tendency to make uncomfortable comments about female soldiers, but she had learned to navigate such situations with professional detachment. The incident occurred during a late evening briefing in the colonel's office. Maria had been called in to discuss her unit's upcoming deployment schedules. What started as a routine meeting quickly turned sinister when locked the office door and made it clear that her career advancement would depend on her compliance with his inappropriate demands. When Maria firmly refused and attempted to leave, the colonel became aggressive. He grabbed her arm forcefully, his grip leaving marks that would later serve as evidence. His words were threatening, making it clear that he would use his position to destroy her military career if she reported the incident or failed to comply with his future demands. Maria managed to break free and exit the office, her mind racing with the implications of what had just occurred. She knew that reporting a colonel would be an uphill battle, especially given the military's historical handling of such cases. However, she also understood that staying silent would only embolden and potentially put other female soldiers at risk. Rather than immediately filing a formal complaint, Maria decided to take a different approach. She began documenting everything meticulously, recording dates, times, and witnesses to every interaction she had with the colonel. She also started reaching out to other female soldiers on the base, carefully inquiring about their experiences without revealing her own situation. What Maria discovered was disturbing but not surprising. 3 other women came forward privately, sharing similar experiences with Colonel. Each had been too afraid to speak up, fearing retaliation and damage to their military careers. Together, they realized they had the power to expose the Colonel's pattern of behavior. Maria's strategy was brilliant in its simplicity. She proposed that they all request transfers to different units simultaneously, citing personal reasons in their official paperwork. However, she also prepared a detailed joint complaint that would be filed with the Inspector General's office the moment their transfers were approved. The plan required perfect timing and coordination. Each woman had to maintain her normal routine while gathering additional evidence. Maria used her position to arrange joint training exercises that would provide opportunities for the women to meet and coordinate their efforts without arousing suspicion. The breakthrough came when Maria discovered that the colonel had been using his office computer to store inappropriate images and messages. Using her technical skills and legitimate access to the base's computer systems for her administrative duties, she was able to document this evidence without compromising the integrity of their case. As the women prepared to execute their plan, Maria made one final decision that would shock everyone on the base. She decided to confront Colonel directly, but not in the way anyone would expect. Instead of a private confrontation, she chose to make her stand during the base's monthly all-hands meeting, where every soldier and officer would be present. The morning of the meeting, Maria arrived early and set up a recording device in the conference room. She had prepared her statement carefully, knowing she would have only one chance to deliver it before being removed from the room. Her plan was to read the joint complaint aloud, nomming the colonel and detailing his inappropriate behavior in front of the entire base. When Colonel called the meeting to order, Maria stood up and requested permission to address the assembly. The colonel, unaware of what was coming, granted her request, expecting a routine announcement or commendation. What followed would become legendary among the soldiers at Fort. Maria's voice was steady and clear as she began reading from her prepared statement. She detailed the colonel's inappropriate behavior, named the other women who had come forward, and presented the evidence they had gathered. The room fell silent as the gravity of her accusations became clear. Colonel's face went through a series of expressions, from confusion to anger to panic, as he realized what was happening. He attempted to interrupt Maria several times, but she continued speaking, her voice growing stronger with each word. The other soldiers in the room sat in stunned silence, witnessing an unprecedented challenge to military hierarchy. When Maria finished her statement, she placed the written complaint and supporting evidence on the colonel's desk and returned to her seat. The room remained silent for several long moments before dismissed the meeting abruptly, his authority clearly shaken. Within hours, the Inspector General's office had launched a formal investigation. Maria's bold move had not only protected herself and the other women, but had also sent a clear message to every soldier on the base that inappropriate behavior would not be tolerated, regardless of rank or position. The investigation moved quickly, with Maria's meticulous documentation providing a clear timeline of events. Other soldiers began coming forward with additional information, and it became clear that Colonel's behavior had been an open secret that many had witnessed, but none had been willing to report. Maria's courage in speaking out publicly had broken the code of silence that had protected the colonel. Her decision to confront him in front of the entire base had eliminated any possibility of the incident being covered up or swept under the rug. The transparency of her approach had forced the military hierarchy to respond swiftly and decisively. The aftermath of Maria's revelation brought significant changes to Fort. New policies were implemented for reporting inappropriate behavior, and training sessions were conducted to ensure that all soldiers understood their rights and responsibilities. Maria's actions had not only addressed her immediate situation, but had also created a safer environment for all soldiers on the base. Colonel was ultimately court-martialed and dismissed from service, his 30-year career ending in disgrace. The 3 other women who had supported Maria's complaint received commendations for their courage, and all 4 were granted their requested transfers to commands of their choosing. Maria's reputation, far from being damaged by her bold stand, was enhanced by her courage and integrity. She received several commendations and was fast-tracked for promotion, eventually becoming one of the youngest sergeant majors in her division. Her story became a case study in military leadership courses, demonstrating how individual courage could affect institutional change. Years later, Maria would reflect on that moment in the conference room as the defining point of her military career. Her decision to speak truth to power, regardless of the potential consequences, had not only changed her own life, but had made the military a better place for countless other soldiers who would never have to face the same challenges she had overcome. The legacy of Maria's courage extended far beyond Fort. Her case became a model for how the military could address inappropriate behavior transparently and effectively. Other bases implemented similar policies, and Maria was often called upon to speak at training sessions and conferences about creating safe and professional military environments. The story of Staff Sergeant Maria serves as a powerful reminder that sometimes the most effective way to create change is to shine a light on problems that have been hidden in darkness. Her courage in speaking out publicly, despite the risks to her career, demonstrated that integrity and justice could triumph over abuse of power, even in the most hierarchical organizations. The colonel attacked her. What she did next left the entire base stunned. Second story outline. Lieutenant Sarah had always been proud of her service in the Army Corps of Engineers. As one of the few female officers in her specialized field, she had worked twice as hard as her male counterparts to prove her competence. Her innovative designs for military infrastructure had earned her recognition throughout the engineering community, and she was being considered for a prestigious assignment to the Pentagon. Colonel Robert had a reputation that preceded him wherever he served. Known for his aggressive leadership style and quick temper, he had nonetheless achieved impressive results throughout his career. When he was assigned to oversee the engineering division at camp, many hoped his demanding nature would push the unit to new levels of excellence. The confrontation happened during what should have been a routine project review. Sarah had been working for months on plans for a new training facility that would revolutionize how combat engineers were prepared for deployment. Her designs incorporated cutting-edge technology with practical field applications, creating a system that would save both time and resources. When Sarah presented her plans to Colonel, she expected the same thorough but fair review she had received from previous commanding officers. Instead, the Colonel immediately began criticizing aspects of her work that demonstrated his fundamental misunderstanding of modern engineering principles. When Sarah attempted to explain the technical details, his response was swift and violent. The physical assault was brief but shocking. The colonel struck Sarah across the face with enough force to knock her backward, then grabbed her by the shoulders and shook her while screaming about respect and military hierarchy. The attack left Sarah with a bruised face and a torn uniform, but more importantly, it shattered her trust in the system she had devoted her career to serving. After regaining her composure, Sarah faced a difficult decision. She could report the incident through normal military channels and hope for justice, or she could find another way to address the situation. Her engineering background had taught her to think systematically about problems, and she began to analyze the colonel's behavior as she would approach any complex technical challenge. Sarah's investigation revealed that Colonel had a pattern of bullying and intimidation that had followed him throughout his career. Previous complaints had been dismissed or resulted in minor reprimands that did nothing to change his behavior. It became clear that traditional reporting mechanisms had failed repeatedly to address the problem. Rather than accepting defeat, Sarah decided to use her technical expertise to create a solution that would be impossible to ignore or dismiss. She began working on what she would later call Operation Spotlight, a comprehensive documentation project that would expose the colonel's behavior in a way that demanded immediate action. Using her access to military communication systems and her knowledge of data analysis, Sarah began collecting evidence of the colonel's inappropriate conduct. She reviewed email communications, recorded conversations where legally permissible, and documented patterns of behavior that showed clear evidence of abuse of power and position. Sarah's breakthrough came when she realized she could use the same project management software that tracked engineering assignments to document the colonel's interactions with subordinates. By creating a detailed timeline of incidents, complete with witness statements and supporting evidence, she built an unassailable case against. The genius of Sarah's approach was its systematic nature. Rather than relying on emotional testimony or he-said-she-said accounts, she created a data-driven analysis that treated the colonel's behavior as a performance problem that required immediate correction. Her engineering training had taught her the importance of documentation and evidence-based conclusions. Sarah's next step was equally innovative. Instead of filing a traditional complaint, she prepared a formal engineering report that analyzed Colonel's leadership failures using the same rigorous standards applied to any technical evaluation. The report included statistical analysis, trend identification, and recommended corrective actions. The report was a masterpiece of technical writing that treated human behavior with the same analytical rigor typically reserved for structural engineering problems. Sarah documented how the colonel's actions had created measurable decreases in unit productivity, increased personnel turnover, and compromised mission effectiveness. When Sarah submitted her report, she sent copies not just to the immediate chain of command, but to every relevant oversight body within the military structure. Her engineering credentials gave the document credibility that a traditional complaint might have lacked, and the technical language made it impossible for recipients to dismiss her findings as emotional reactions. The response was immediate and dramatic. Military investigators who might have been skeptical of a personal complaint found themselves confronted with engineering quality documentation that met their highest standards of evidence. Sarah's systematic approach had created a case that was virtually bulletproof from a legal perspective. Within days of receiving Sarah's report, the Inspector General's office launched a comprehensive investigation. The technical nature of Sarah's documentation made it easy for investigators to verify her findings and identify additional victims who had been reluctant to come forward previously. Colonel's first response was to attempt intimidation, threatening Sarah with retaliation for her insubordination. However, his threats only provided additional evidence for investigators, who were already building a comprehensive case based on Sarah's meticulous documentation. The colonel's second mistake was attempting to discredit Sarah's technical competence, suggesting that her engineering report was somehow flawed or biased. This approach backfired spectacularly when independent military engineers reviewed Sarah's work and confirmed both its accuracy and its innovative approach to behavioral analysis. As the investigation proceeded, Sarah continued her normal duties while providing additional support to investigators. Her calm, professional demeanor throughout the process impressed everyone involved and demonstrated the kind of leadership qualities that the military valued most highly. The turning point came when other officers began submitting their own technical reports, documenting problems with Colonel's leadership. Sarah's approach had provided a template that allowed others to speak up without fear of being dismissed as complainers or troublemakers. Sarah's methodology was so effective that it was adopted by other units facing similar challenges. Military leadership began to recognize that engineering principles could be applied to human resources problems with remarkable success, leading to significant changes in how complaints and concerns were addressed throughout the service. The investigation concluded with Colonel facing multiple charges related to assault, abuse of authority, and conduct unbecoming an officer. The evidence against him was so overwhelming that he chose to accept a plea agreement rather than face a court-martial trial. Sarah's vindication came not just through the Colonel's punishment, but through recognition of her innovative approach to addressing systemic problems. Her report became required reading in military leadership courses, and she was invited to speak at conferences about applying engineering principles to organizational challenges. The broader impact of Sarah's actions extended far beyond her personal situation. The military adopted new protocols for addressing complaints that incorporated systematic documentation and analysis techniques. These changes made it much more difficult for abusive officers to escape accountability and provided better protection for soldiers reporting inappropriate behavior. Sarah's career flourished following her courageous stand against Colonel. She received several commendations and was fast-tracked for promotion to major. Her Pentagon assignment came through ahead of schedule, and she was given additional responsibilities for developing new approaches to military problem-solving. The story of Lieutenant Sarah demonstrates how professional expertise can be leveraged to address personal injustices in ways that create systemic improvements. Her engineering background provided her with tools and perspectives that traditional complaint processes lacked, resulting in both personal vindication and institutional reform. Years later, Sarah would reflect on how her technical training had prepared her to address human problems with the same rigor and creativity she applied to engineering challenges. Her success in holding Colonel accountable had shown that systematic thinking and careful documentation could triumph over abuse of power, even in highly hierarchical organizations. The legacy of Sarah's innovative approach continues to influence military culture today. Her demonstration that professional competence could be combined with moral courage to create positive change inspired countless other service members to speak up against injustice and work for institutional improvement. Sarah's story serves as a powerful example of how individual actions, when guided by professional expertise and unwavering integrity, can create lasting positive change that extends far beyond the original situation that prompted those actions. The Colonel attacked her. What she did next left the entire base stunned. Third story outline. Captain Jennifer had dedicated 12 years of her life to military intelligence, building a reputation as one of the most skilled analysts in her field. Her ability to identify patterns and connections in complex data had prevented numerous security breaches and saved countless lives during overseas operations. As the head of intelligence operations at Fort Henderson, she commanded a team of 20 specialists who looked to her for guidance and leadership. Colonel arrived at Fort Henderson with impressive credentials and high-level connections throughout the military intelligence community. His previous assignments had included sensitive positions at the Pentagon and overseas commands, where he had access to classified operations at the highest levels. Many expected his arrival to bring new opportunities and enhanced prestige to the intelligence division. The attack occurred in Colonel's private office during what was supposed to be a classified briefing about ongoing intelligence operations. Jennifer had been called in to discuss sensitive surveillance data that her team had collected regarding potential security threats in the region. The meeting began normally, with reviewing the materials and asking standard questions about sources and methods. The situation changed suddenly when locked the office door and disabled the security cameras, actions that immediately raised Jennifer's suspicion given the sensitive nature of their discussion. When she questioned his motives, the Colonel became aggressive, explaining that her continued career advancement would depend on her willingness to provide him with personal favors rather than professional competence. Jennifer's refusal to comply triggered a violent response from. He struck her repeatedly, threatening to destroy not only her career, but also the careers of the analysts who worked under her supervision. The physical assault was accompanied by detailed threats about how he could manipulate classified information to make her appear incompetent or even treasonous. The attack left Jennifer with visible bruises and a clear understanding that she was dealing with an adversary who was willing to abuse both his position and classified materials to achieve his personal goals. As an intelligence professional, she recognized that traditional complaint procedures might be ineffective against someone with connections and access to sensitive information. Jennifer's response demonstrated the strategic thinking that had made her successful in intelligence work. Instead of immediately reporting the incident, she began treating Colonel as she would any security threat that required careful investigation and strategic neutralization. Her years of experience in counterintelligence had prepared her for exactly this type of challenge. Using her legitimate access to personnel databases and security clearance information, Jennifer began building a comprehensive profile of Colonel's background and connections. What she discovered was deeply troubling evidence of previous incidents that had been covered up or explained away due to his high-level connections and access to classified operations. Jennifer's investigation revealed that had a history of using classified information and his security clearance as weapons against subordinates who refused to comply with his inappropriate demands. Previous victims had been transferred to less sensitive positions or had their security clearances revoked based on fabricated concerns about their reliability and judgment. The Colonel's method of operation was sophisticated and calculating. He would identify talented female officers in sensitive positions, then use their access to classified materials as leverage against them. Those who, with his demands, received choice assignments and rapid promotions, while those who refused found their careers systematically destroyed through manipulated security reviews. Jennifer realized that exposing would require more than traditional complaint procedures. His ability to manipulate classified materials and security processes made him virtually immune to normal disciplinary actions. She needed to develop a strategy that would neutralize his advantages while protecting both herself and the other victims she was beginning to identify. The breakthrough came when Jennifer discovered that had been using classified intelligence resources for personal purposes, including background investigations on his victims and their families. This abuse of classified systems violated numerous federal laws and military regulations, providing a foundation for charges that would be impossible for even his high-level connections to dismiss. Jennifer's plan was methodical and comprehensive. She began documenting his abuse of classified systems while simultaneously reaching out to his previous victims to build a pattern of evidence that would be impossible to explain away. Her intelligence background gave her the skills needed to gather evidence without alerting to her investigation. The genius of Jennifer's approach was her decision to involve federal counterintelligence agents rather than relying solely on military channels. Its abuse of classified materials had created potential national security violations that fell under federal jurisdiction, removing the case from his sphere of influence within the military hierarchy. Working carefully with federal agents, Jennifer provided evidence of misuse of classified systems while building a coalition of his victims who were willing to testify about his pattern of abuse. Her reputation within the intelligence community gave her credibility with investigators who might have been skeptical of less experienced accusers. Jennifer's most brilliant tactical decision was timing the exposure of his activities to coincide with his application for an even more sensitive position that would have given him access to the most classified intelligence operations. The security review process for the new position provided a perfect opportunity to present evidence of his misconduct without appearing to seek personal revenge. When federal investigators began their security review of Colonel, they discovered Jennifer's carefully documented evidence of his abuse of classified materials and systematic intimidation of subordinates. The evidence was so comprehensive and professionally presented that investigators had no choice but to launch a full investigation. His initial response was to attempt intimidation, using his access to classified materials to threaten Jennifer and the other witnesses. However, his threats were now being monitored by federal agents, providing additional evidence of his willingness to abuse classified information for personal purposes. The Colonel's second mistake was attempting to use his high-level connections to pressure investigators to drop the case. These efforts only succeeded in drawing attention from senior officials who were concerned about potential security breaches and abuse of classified materials within the intelligence community. As the investigation proceeded, Jennifer continued her normal duties while providing extensive cooperation to federal agents. Her professional demeanor and detailed documentation impressed investigators, who recognized that they were dealing with someone who understood the serious nature of security violations. The case against grew stronger as additional victims came forward, encouraged by Jennifer's example and the protection provided by federal involvement. Each new witness added to the pattern of evidence showing systematic abuse of position and classified materials over multiple assignments. The investigation revealed that had compromised numerous classified operations through his personal use of intelligence resources. His activities had potentially exposed sources and methods, creating genuine national security concerns that extended far beyond his personal misconduct. Ultimately faced federal charges related to misuse of classified information, in addition to military charges for assault and abuse of authority. The federal charges carried potential prison sentences that made his military career the least of his concerns. Jennifer's vindication came through recognition of her professional competence and moral courage in exposing serious security violations. She received commendations from both military and federal officials for her role in protecting classified information and identifying a significant security threat. The case resulted in comprehensive reforms to security procedures and oversight mechanisms for personnel with access to classified materials. Jennifer's systematic approach to investigating and exposing misconduct became a model for addressing similar threats within the intelligence community. Jennifer's career reached new heights following her courageous stand against Colonel. She was promoted to major and given responsibility for developing new counterintelligence procedures designed to prevent the type of abuse had perpetrated. The broader impact of Jennifer's actions extended throughout the intelligence community, where her case became a landmark example of how professional expertise and moral courage could be combined to address serious security threats posed by insider abuse. Jennifer's story demonstrates how specialized professional skills can be applied to personal challenges in ways that create systemic improvements and protect national security interests. Her intelligence background provided her with unique tools for investigating and exposing misconduct while protecting herself and other victims. Years later, Jennifer would reflect on how her counterintelligence training had prepared her to recognize and respond to activities as a genuine security threat rather than simply a personal problem. Her systematic approach had not only protected her own career, but had also prevented potential damage to national security operations. The legacy of Jennifer's courageous actions continues to influence security procedures and training throughout the intelligence community. Her demonstration that professional competence and moral integrity could triumph over abuse of classified materials and high-level connections inspired reforms that continue to protect both personnel and national security interests today.